everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new to my channel, my name is Melissa and I'm a nursing student. So first off, I want to apologize for the messy background. If you did not watch my previous video, then you may not know I am moving. So I'm literally actively moving today as I'm filming this, and I just took a little break to sit down and film this because I don't know when else I'm gonna have time to film it and upload it. This is an update video. So I just finished taking pediatrics at Chamberlain. I'm in their evening and weekend BSN program, and I attend the Tyson's Corner campus. And so every time I finish a session or I finish a set of classes, I do a video talking about my experience in that class. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the lecture portion of peds, and then in my next video, I'm going to make a separate video talking about the clinical aspect. So first, I will just start off by saying pediatrics was probably the hardest class that I've taken at Chamberlain so far. I passed peds. Technically today's the last day of the session, so it hasn't ended yet, but I'm going to pass peds with a C+. And I'm very blessed to have gotten a C+, even though it's not a great grade. But I'm going to get into why peds was difficult. It was difficult for a couple of reasons, but first I'm going to talk about the layout of the course. Of course, it's 8 weeks because Chamberlain has an accelerated BSN program where classes are condensed into 8 weeks. And I had to go in person for lecture twice a week, and each lecture was 3 hours long. And now I will say I get a lot of questions asking if my classes are online, if they're in person, what my schedule is. And so I just want to get it out there. When I first started at Chamberlain in 2021, COVID was still going on, and so there were a lot of restrictions with COVID. So I've never been in an online program for nursing school. It's always been an in-person evening and weekend program. But when I first started in the program, a lot of my classes were, first off, I was still taking my general education, my prerequisites. I was not actually in my nursing courses yet. And so those were offered online. And they were either fully online or some of my classes were hybrid where we had lecture online, but then we had to come in person for exams or for labs. And that was just because of COVID. So once COVID restrictions were lifted, sometime in 2021 or 2022, we had to start going to campus for all of our classes. So I always have to go to campus for my classes. I always have to go in person for any labs, but now I'm doing clinical. So those are all in person. So I wanted to get that out of the way. So with that being said, I did have to go to campus 2 nights a week. Each lecture was 3 hours long. And I will say, just because that was my schedule for pediatrics does not mean that that's going to be your schedule if you have not taken it yet. And so lectures were standard. I had my professor teaching off of PowerPoints. We had group activities. It was really engaging. I actually really liked my professor. She was a really nice person. And it was my first time having her. So now I'm going to go into exams. This course, just like any other nursing course at Chamberlain, had 3 exams, but the exams were different, and it was a good and a bad thing. So there are 3 exams in this course. There was exam 1, which we took in week 3. So we had week 1 was lecture, week 2 was lecture, and then in week 3 we were tested on all the material that we learned in weeks 1 and 2. And then we had exam 2, which was our midterm, and that was given in week 5. So exam 1 was given in week 3, exam 2 was given in week 5, and then exam 3 was given in week 7, which is different than any other nursing class I've taken at Chamberlain. So typically exam 3 is a final, and you take that not only the last week of class, but the actual last day of class. You take your final and then you go home when you're done. For whatever reason, this session, at least for my class in peds, exam 3 was actually given in week 7, and I did not like that, and I don't think any of my classmates liked that because we felt extremely rushed and we were not sure why. Essentially, if your final exam is given in week 7, then it's kind of technically a 7-week course, which it should be an 8-week course. So I'm not sure why that was done. I'm not sure if that's what Chamberlain's going to do moving forward. I'm not sure if that was just for pediatrics. I don't know the rationale. My professor didn't know the rationale, but that was one thing I didn't like. this course felt extremely rushed because our last exam was in week 7 versus week 8. Another thing that was different about the exams this session, the CMS was actually our final. So if you are a nursing student or if you're a Chamberlain student, you know that CMS is not an exam given to you through your professor. I don't even think it's given to you through Chamberlain. It's given through the software called ATI, and it's essentially to test your NCLEX readiness on the course that they're testing you on. What I don't like about the CMS, and what a lot of students that I know of at Chamberlain do not like about the CMS, is whatever grade you get on the CMS is what goes into your grade book. So if you get a 50% on the CMS, you get a 50% on your midterm, and that's what goes into the grade book. And I don't like that because in ATI, the software that we take CMS, it tells you the national average. More often than not, the national average is somewhere in the 60s or the 70s. So in my opinion, I don't think that it's fair to administer an exam where the national average is essentially less than a C by Chamberlain standards, and then whatever grade you get goes into the grade book without a curve or without a significant curve. So it kind of just plummets our grade for what I consider to be no reason. I'm sure that there is a logic and a reason behind it. I don't like criticizing things when I don't know the full picture, but at least from my point of view and from all of my classmates' point of view, we don't understand why it's done that way. But anyway, with PEDS, this was the first class where the CMS was given to us as our final. So every other nursing class I've taken at Chamberlain up until now, we've had exam 1, which was given to us by our professor. Our professor made the exam and we took it. Exam 2 was actually the CMS, which was just, my professor did not make the exam. They would just proctor the exam and monitor us as we took it. It was totally out of their control. They did not know what was going to be on the exam. And then exam 3 would be the final, which was made and administered by our professor. That's how it always has been in the past. For pediatrics for this session, it was different. We took exam 1, then we took exam 2, which was our midterm given to us by our professor, and then the final was actually the CMS. And I actually really liked it this way. I prefer the CMS being the final, and that is because the CMS, like I said, like I went into, it's a standardized exam that kind of tests your readiness for the NCLEX on that particular subject. So the CMS I took in PEDS tested my NCLEX readiness for pediatrics. So in the past, to me anyway, it felt like I was being tested on things that I may not have even learned yet because I was taking this standardized exam in the middle of the class. So with pediatrics, I learned everything that I needed to learn from my professor in the course, and then I took the CMS as the final. So to me, that felt more fair because I went into CMS, or I went into the standardized exam feeling confident that I was at least taught everything that I should know for the exam. So that I did like. What I didn't like, or another aspect of this course that I found to be very difficult, it made PEDS difficult, and it was completely different than anything that's happened to me in the program so far, was that our exams were not created by our professors. So like I mentioned in the past, my professor would be the one teaching me, and then they would also be the one developing the exam and administering the exam. With this session, my professor did not make any of the exams. So somebody above my professor, or a team above my professor, made exam 1 and exam 2, and my professor did not know what was going to be on the exam ahead of time. And the reason why I don't like that, or I did not like that, was because it made the exams more difficult. So if a professor is the one teaching you and then they're the one creating the exam, they can kind of curate and they can kind of develop their lesson plan around the exam. So if they know certain topics are going to be on the exam, I'm sure most people or most professors would probably spend more time in class going over that material. If they know that certain topics are not going to be on the exam, they may go over it, but they may not spend an entire class dedicated to that material. When it's a situation where the professor is not making the exam, they don't know what's on the exam, it's kind of like a shot in the dark. There's only so much material that you can teach somebody on a subject in 8 weeks. Like, that's just kind of the fact of it. It's an accelerated program, so there are of course going to be topics that you spend more time on than others. And so the problem when the professor is not making the exam, they may spend a lot of time talking about something, and then you get to the exam and the topics that they spent a lot of time talking about are not really covered on the exam, versus the topics that they may have kind of brushed over quickly. That is what was heavily on the exam. So that's kind of what I encountered this past session. I didn't like it. I think I understand the rationale behind it. I mean, I guess that's kind of how the NCLEX is. You don't know what's going to be on the exam before you go into it, so you should just kind of study everything. But to me, it just made things unnecessarily difficult. And that was not just with my professor this session. I've heard that that's what Chamberlain is going to start doing moving forward. So it's just, I guess, something to get used to. It's just different, and pediatrics is just the first time that I've encountered it. Now, when it comes to the homework in pediatrics, you do have EDAPs, of course. If you're a Chamberlain student, you know what EDAPT is. I found this class to be kind of EDAPT heavy. I've taken classes that had more EDAPs than this, but this course was definitely very EDAPT heavy. So if I were you and you have not taken it yet, I would pace yourself. My advice is always to try to work ahead if you can, just because, at least for my schedule, some weeks I have more time to dedicate to EDAPT, and so on those weeks I try to knock out as much as I possibly can. And then other weeks when I'm busy with work and stuff, because I work full-time, I don't have as much time to dedicate to EDAPT, and so it's good to work ahead in case you encounter any emergencies, or if your life gets busy and you may not have a lot of time to work on it one week. That's just my advice. You also have ATI assignments. I don't know if they're case studies. I can't remember if they're case studies or not, but you do have 3 ATI assignments in this class, or at least I had 3 ATI assignments. And then on top of that, we had to take our practice tests. So before the CMS, you have practice tests that you can take to help you prepare for the CMS. And there's practice test A, practice test B, and however you do on practice test B, you're gonna have to do a remediation. And then that remediation you put into a binder. If you're a Chamberlain student, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is no different than any other nursing course, and you still have to do your binder the same as you would have had to do in any other course. And that's pretty much it. I want this video to be quick. This class was pretty standard. I mean, you have your exams, you have your ATIs, you have your EDAPs. Oh, we did have a project. So our RUA, our required uniform assignment, we did have, at least for me, I don't know if it changes depending on your professor, but I did have a paper to write. Of course, I'm not going to tell you guys what my topic was or what the parameters of the paper were, because I never want to cross into the realm of cheating. But I will give you a hint. It had to do with pediatrics. Obviously. I'm really good at writing. I didn't find the paper to be too difficult. If you're not good at writing, I think you'll probably do fine. I don't know you, but I have faith in you. But if you're not good at writing, my advice would be to start the paper early. Like the first day of class, the professor typically goes over the syllabus. If I were you, if you know that you're not good at writing, look at the parameters for this RUA or for your paper. Ask your professor questions literally that first day if you have any questions, and just kind of start little by little doing the paper. That way you won't run into any issues or any like writer's block or anything. I think I started my paper at the last minute. I'm very good at writing though, and I'm very good with APA formatting. So it just kind of depends on what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. I forgot to mention, this class, of course, obviously has a MedCalc exam the very first night of class. And so that is everything. So I will say this class was hard for me personally because I got a really rough start to this class. I was very sick the first 2 weeks of classes, and so my attendance was kind of spotty. So I got a really bad start to this course. And so that was probably the main thing that made this class so difficult. And if I didn't get such a bad start to the course, which then I had to spend the rest of the course playing catch up, unfortunately, I definitely could have gotten a better grade. I don't think I would have gotten an A. I'm just being totally honest, because this class was hard. Another thing that made it hard was the different way that Chamberlain is now doing their exams. Another thing that made this class hard was the fact that it felt rushed. Like I mentioned, we took our final in week 7 opposed to week 8. So really it felt like a 7-week course instead of an 8-week course. So that alone made the class very difficult. And then another thing for me was just that pediatrics was just really hard. Like there are a lot of weight-based medications. All medications in pediatrics are weight-based. Just because children's bodies are so small, you have to make sure that you're not giving them toxic levels of medication. So before I'll go into that for clinical because that's a whole other thing. But even on paper, when you're in lecture, doing exams, learning about pediatrics, everything is based on your patient's weight. And so if you are not good at med calc, that's definitely something you probably want to brush up on before you get to this class. That would be my advice to you. Another reason why this class was so difficult for me was because it felt almost like I had to relearn a lot of the basics, like a lot of the fundamentals. So vital signs, for example, if it's an adult, a normal heart rate, I can easily tell you should be between 60 beats per minute to 100 beats per minute. I know the normal range of what temperature should be for adults. I know the normal range of what respirations, blood pressure. I feel like I've spent all my time in nursing school learning about how to take care of adult human bodies and what their normal ranges, normal lab values are. And then you get to pediatrics, or I got to pediatrics, and I was kind of not told to forget everything that I know, but children or adolescents, babies, infants, everyone that's not an adult, there are different lab value, like vital signs, there are different lab values. And so you have to memorize all of that in addition to the weight-based medical calculations and the weight-based medication administration. And then on top of that, there's also the vaccination schedules. You're supposed to know, you're going to learn it all from your professor, but you need to memorize and know what age a child should be getting their different vaccines. You need to know developmental stages. What age should a baby be sitting up on their own? What age should a baby be able to hold their head up on their own? Just all of this, to me, very complicated stuff. And I will say for some people, it was easier for them. A lot of my mamas, like a lot of the moms in my class, they were kind of able to be like, oh, I remember when my child first sat up, they were blah, blah, blah old. Or I remember when my child started talking and walking, they were blah, blah, blah old. So having a kid doesn't mean that the class is going to be easy for you. But if you have a small child, it may be a little bit easier. That's how I felt. I have no experience with children. I don't know about their developmental patterns. I don't know any of that stuff. So walking into pediatrics was just different for me, and it was just, for whatever reason, it was really hard for me to retain all of this information. Part of it could have also been psychological, because I know pediatrics is, I'm open to any specialty in nursing, and I would love to try out every specialty if I could. Pediatrics was the one going into it where I have no interest in pediatrics. Now that I've taken the class and had clinical, I have no interest. And so I guess for me, I was learning all of this information, and in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm only going to need this twice in my life. Once when I'm taking pediatrics, and once when I'm taking the NCLEX. And then after that, I don't need this information. I almost did not pass this class, I'll be honest. I came very close to not passing this class. So keep that in mind. If you have not taken peds yet and you're nervous about taking it, my advice to you would be to pay attention. First off, pay attention to the vital signs, the normal ranges for lab values. Pay very close attention to the vaccination schedule, and practice your med calc, specifically your weight-based medical calculations. As always, my biggest tip is to stay on top of your work. Do not get behind. I got behind this session. I was able to play catch up, but I came very close to failing this class, and I was very nervous about failing this class. So that is my cautionary tale. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it to the end, I apologize if it was all over the place. I apologize for all of the boxes and everything in the background. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please go ahead and comment down below. I'd be happy to answer. If you have a more private question, you can feel free to email me. I always put my email in the description box of my videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video.